I am here live with Wendy Stengel, my very good friend. We met in a group called Business Networking International, and I've just been so impressed with her since she joined. I did one of her newsletters called the Health Hacks, and I was learning a lot about how you can build healthier practices and things like that. And it's been helping me in this new year with my goals. So I thought I would have her on. She's a very smart lady, the owner of Food Goddess, where she helps people, empowers people of all ages to really take control of their personal wellness. So very happy to have you on today. How are you doing, Wendy?
I'm great, Joseph. Thank you. I'm super happy to be on with you. Thanks for having me.
Very good. Yeah, I'm happy too, because nutrition is just one of those things that people really get up in arms about. We're not going to do that today. We're going to have a friendly discussion. But I really wanted to just ask you some questions about nutrition. How did you get into nutrition, first of all? Like, how did you get into the business of helping people with their diets?
Sure, that's a great question. So twofold, there are a couple of things that happened. One thing is I work as a speech pathologist and I specialize in feeding and swallowing disorders. And so I work a lot with families who have a lot of questions about nutrition. Either they're trying to move their child from a feeding tube where they're only getting a formula, or they're trying to just build more a wider food repertoire because their children have a really limited diet for one reason or another. And so I wanted to be able to really answer questions. So that started with really fueled the education piece. And then I also had some issues with my children. When my daughters were young, they had a lot of food allergies, my younger daughter in particular. And we started to make some really key dietary changes. The very first thing was a plant powder that's in a capsule or a gummy form. So that started that. And then I needed to learn more. So between the two, as I learned more, I knew that there was a big way for me to really impact people's health and empower them to heal their own bodies. So that's really what fueled that in a really big way.
Yeah, that's awesome. And then what are some success stories that you've seen just in your business of people who came to you, maybe had a bad diet, maybe they were eating like Doritos, Mountain Dew every day, and improved? Like, what are some stories of that, and what did you learn from that?
Wow. Yeah. So I think it have been a lot of really cool success stories of in different nature. So a lot of people come to me, they either want to lose a few pounds, or maybe there's a health concern, or there's been a health scare in their family and they have the gene. And so a lot of things begin with that. And I think the biggest thing that happens is, so when I work with people, I work from what I call a plant forward perspective. So the more color on the plate, the more nutrient dense the plate is. So we want to eliminate as many inflammatory foods as possible and add in as many anti-inflammatory foods as possible. Yeah. And so what happens is somebody might say, I want to lose a few pounds, or I want to lose so much weight by this time. And this is not a rapid weight loss program. So yes, people do tend to lose weight that they don't need when they do this program. But the thing that happens more often than not is they see the difference in their body and how they feel. Yeah. People will tell me, I didn't know that I didn't have to have pain. I've worked with a couple of people with rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis. And in those cases, I mean, they woke up pain-free and they hadn't done it in years. I had one person whose A1C, which is an indicator of diabetes, was 7.6, and within 2 months it was 5.3. Wow. Which is down below the pre-diabetic level, just by changing their diet. And so those things are huge and hugely successful. So I can go on about, tons of stories like that. So, but it's really amazing to see when people really put their energy into what they're doing. They really do see a difference in their health.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for sharing that. I didn't know that about rheumatoid arthritis, but that almost makes sense that it would be caused by it's inflammation, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's awesome that
Absolutely.
you could have that type
Most
of
autoimmune diseases are inflammatory based.
Right.
There's some sort of inflammatory, asthma is huge in
Oh,
our society, and that's an inflammatory based disease.
yeah.
And if we change how we eat, we really can breathe better.
Yeah.
So that's a big deal. Mm-hmm.
What are some surprising, I guess, surprising diseases that can be cured, or you've seen be cured, or at least helped by diet?
Mm-hmm. Well, I can't claim that I can cure anything. Like your
Okay.
diet, right? Um, because there's just so much to that, and but what we do know is
Mhm.
that the right foods don't hurt.
Yeah.
Plant foods, fruits and vegetables are not going to hurt,
Right.
and so because of that, I see a lot of benefit in a wide variety of um, difficulties. Maybe somebody's just really, their immune system isn't strong and they get it colds and that sort of thing. And I hear that a lot. Oh my gosh, I haven't had a cold in a year. I didn't even realize
Yeah.
that sort of thing. But one of the things that I do is I ask my clients to bring their most recent labs, their most
Mhm.
recent blood work to
Yeah.
me in the beginning of our meetings, and we go through those and we talk about what everything means. And I don't interpret anything, but we do talk about what it all means. Because, you look at lab work and you see all these different letters and you don't know what means what. And so it helps to know what you're looking at, number one. And again, under the heading of empowerment, looking at that really helps people understand it,
Mhm.
and it does guide us. So we know that if your cholesterol is high, we definitely know we need to cut out saturated fats,
Mhm.
those sorts of things. So fast forward to, once the program is completed, 4 to 6 months later, they can go and get their blood work done again.
Mhm.
And then I'll have a meeting with them and we can compare beginning and end. So
Yeah.
it's really, really good feedback so that people know exactly what has happened internally.
Yeah.
And the other fascinating thing is doctors will do that lab work at
Mhm.
times, and they'll ask my clients, have you been doing a more plant-based diet? Because they're looking at their lab work, and maybe they haven't said a word about it to the doctor, but the doctor sees it in the lab
Yeah.
work. So it's really powerful.
Very cool. Yeah, that's awesome. Like it's cut and dry. Like you look at the labs and like this is before and after how you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I feel like when it comes to diet, same with me, when I help people with their finances, everyone knows what to do. They know like save your money, eat healthy foods and exercise. How do you get people to stick with it? Because I've seen a lot of people, even myself sometimes, where I'll be trying to stick with something and it's just like, never mind. I don't want it. I don't want it that way.
Right. Right.
How do you get people to stick with that?
So the key there is to make it simple.
Mhm.
Because we're busy. We're all very busy people. You hear that all the time. And granted, the last year has really forced us to slow down some.
Yeah.
But even so, we live generally very busy lives, and we don't make a whole lot of time for our own health. We put that on the back burner, or it's something we kind of say, oh, I have too much to do today. I'll do that later. And so the key is to make it simple and make it inexpensive, because those are the two big things. I don't have time and I don't have enough money
Mhm.
to eat healthy. Well, if I can show you how to save money eating healthier and how to go to the grocery store and get what you need, so that on a busy day, if you're a soccer mom, for example, you have a
Mhm.
car full of kids and you have places to be. If I can show you how to go home, cook a quick meal with what you have on hand, put it in paper bowls and hand them out to your kids, get back in the car and go to the next thing in less time and with less money than it takes you to go to the drive-through at Las Palapas,
Mhm.
is that valuable to you? And so, most of the time, the answer to that is yes. So it's about making it simple. And that's the idea behind the health hacks, which is a program that I'm doing with 3 other health coaches, which is really fun because we each are sharing different health hacks, different things to make those things easier.
Mhm.
That's really the key. I think. And one of the things that I do also is I do a grocery store tour as part of my program.
Mhm.
And when we do that, we go through the grocery store and it's usually Trader Joe's, because I know that people can save money there. You
Yeah.
can eat organic, you can eat pretty in season, and you go through there and we talk about how to save money, what you can order, what you can buy to save money, and then also what shortcuts there are that you can take where you're not sacrificing the integrity of what you're eating. So I think those are the key things to really helping people be successful, is to keep it really simple.
Yeah. Like make it easy on yourself. I can see that people try to take on a lot and then it's like, okay, never mind. Like you're joking.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I like that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to ask you some questions about, I guess let's talk about sugar. Everyone,
Okay.
I come from a family of sugar ants.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I'm just like, I'm just going to tell you the truth. Sometimes I'll go to the grocery store and I see some Oreos and it's like my guilty pleasure. So I'll be like, okay, I'm going to bring home the Oreos and I'll eat like a whole sleeve of the Oreos when I get home. What do you have to say about sugar? Or what advice do you have on that? Because I know it's addictive. I know it's a hard habit to kick. So
Right. And we talk about inflammatory foods, right? Sugar is one of those highly inflammatory foods.
yeah.
It's the root of a whole lot of things in our body. We know that, especially in San Antonio, where the diabetes rates are huge here
Mhm.
in this in the city,
Yeah.
that sugar is a big culprit for that. And so when we look at MRIs, magnetic resonance imaging,
Mhm.
you can take those the printouts and compare them. You see what lights up when somebody eats sugar, and by the way, it's the same thing happens when somebody eats dairy. Sugar or dairy, there's a certain area of the brain that lights up. It's the pleasure center, and it's also the addiction center, and it's
Wow.
the same center that lights up when somebody uses cocaine or heroin.
Wow.
And so people will say, oh, I just can't give up the sugar, or I get these sugar cravings, or I can't quit dairy. I can do anything else. I just can't give up my cheese. Or, you combine them. Ice cream is, man, that's a tough one for people, right?
Yeah.
And there's a reason why. And I hear people say all the time. In fact, just yesterday, I had somebody say, I just don't have the discipline. It's not about discipline is the thing.
Mhm.
There's an actual brain response that's happening that's making you want more of that. And so it really can be very difficult to eliminate or even to minimize those things, because when you're dealing with that pleasure center and when you're dealing with addiction to certain foods, you eat a little bit of it and you want more of it, right? And so, but it wreaks havoc on your system. It affects your weight. It affects your heart rate. It affects your brain function. So it really can be hard on your body.
I've certainly noticed that with sugar. I eat a lot of sugar. Get like a high, but then later I feel tired and
Yeah,
more
you
irritable.
crash.
Yeah. So I've definitely noticed.
Right. It's
So
that
we talked
crash.
about how you start. Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, you're good.
So we talked about how you start something healthy. How do you stop something that's addictive like sugar if someone's eating like, a lot of food, like eating sleeves of Oreos like I am? Like, how do you stop
Right.
that?
Well, you have to find something to replace it,
Okay.
at least for a little while, something to satisfy that craving. And so for some people, that can be fruit. It can be something like that. For most people, that doesn't do it. Fruit isn't sweet enough, or it's not the right kind of sweet. So prior to my work as a speech pathologist and my work as a nutritionist, I worked in the restaurant industry for about 20 years. And so I would eat anything under the sun. And I definitely had a sweet tooth. I definitely craved sugar. And that was a tough one for me as I got older and learned how I, wanted to eat healthier and the impact that it had on my body. So for me, dates became my go-to. So I didn't used to like dates a whole lot. Now I love them. And you'll laugh at this, but I love them because they taste like icing to me. And I love cake icing. So they are so sweet. They get that, hurt your teeth kind of sweet fix
Yeah.
for me. And they're high in magnesium, they're high in calcium, they're high in vitamin C, they're high in vitamin E, they're super high in fiber. So you get all these benefits from them that you don't get from icing.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I'm going to make a note of that, because dates, I'll try those out as like a sugar substitute next time I'm craving some Oreos.
Yeah, it's just about trying to find that thing that's going to work for you, and knowing where the sweet comes from. So you can use maple syrup in your coffee, for example, like pure maple syrup in your coffee or your tea, or honey. As long as it's raw organic honey, you can use those things to substitute sugar. But even any kind of sweetener that you add should be done in moderation. But when you're dealing with a fruit, like a date, something that's a whole food, it works different. It works different in your body. And so you don't have the same concerns of added sugars.
Okay. Very good. And we have a question in the chat here that I wanted to ask. What are some common inflammation causing foods that people should consider cutting out of their diet, or at least limiting?
So gluten is one. We hear that a whole lot. Gluten can be highly inflammatory. It affects different people in different ways. And typically you can tolerate whole grain sources. So whole wheat, for example, can, especially if it's sprouted, it can be softer on the immune system. But gluten does this funny thing where it's not really so funny. So when you eat something, it goes to your stomach breaks it down, and then it goes to your small intestine. So the first part of that is the duodenum, and that's where we absorb most of our nutrients. And gluten is a molecule, and it's very sticky, and so it sticks to that lining of that small intestine. And when it does that, and you're eating other nutrients, it can block absorption of those other nutrients. For anyone, if you have any kind of sensitivity, which a lot of people do, if you have any kind of sensitivity to gluten, then it also causes inflammation in that process, because it's sticking to the intestine, and then it's becoming inflamed, and then you block even more absorption of any other good nutrients. So that's one. Another one is dairy, casein in particular, which is the protein molecule of dairy. A lot of people think, oh, well, I'm lactose intolerant. Lactose is the sugar molecule in dairy. And so you might feel some benefit to eating lactose free, but really the trigger is not going to go away, because the trigger's in that protein molecule. And that is also highly inflammatory, particularly in the digestive system. And animal proteins in general it can be a bit taboo to talk about that, but it's an important part of the conversation. It scares people. Oh, I don't want to give up my meat. There's different ways you can do that. And cutting back, even if you go 1 day a week, you're making a positive impact on your body. Of no animal proteins, but animal proteins are super highly inflammatory. Even, the American Heart Association recommends that people not eat red meat. So, and that's why, because it's systemically inflammatory, and we don't see that on the outside of our body is the other thing. When we talk about inflammation, we don't see that happening until something breaks. But the process to get you there is long.
I hear you. Let's talk a little bit about, I'm going to talk about a diet that you probably hate. Have you ever heard of the Carnivore Diet?
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that? To me, that's just like gut reaction is just like, that's really bad for you. Maybe if you need
right. Well, if we just piggyback off of what we just said, right, about it being highly inflammatory. So in the carnivore diet, you're eliminating all fruits and veggies pretty much. So those are all your anti-inflammatory foods. So the biggest ones are dark leafy greens, dark cruciferous vegetables like Brussels sprouts, broccoli, that sort of thing, and dark berries. So blueberries, blackberries, raspberries. All plant foods tend to be anti-inflammatory to some degree, but the darker the color, the more nutrient dense. The more nutrient dense, generally speaking, the more anti-inflammatory. So if you take all of those out, and you only consume animal protein, then you are loading your body with saturated fat, which is what becomes cholesterol. You are inflaming your arteries, which is why heart attacks happen. It's not just about the cholesterol. The cholesterol builds up, but then the actual walls of the artery become inflamed. And so just nothing can move through, and you end up with a heart attack or a stroke. So if you go back to, those things kind of are spinoffs of the keto diet and the paleo diet. To some degree, paleo is a little bit more balanced because it does allow for fruits and veggies. And the Atkins diet, I mean, Dr. Atkins died of a heart attack.
Oh, really?
Following his own diet. Yes. And not a lot of people talk about that. He sure did. So
that is crazy.
Yeah.
A little bit about keto. I used to be keto, and I talked to you, and you're telling me about the inflammation inside your body. And yeah, it's like you look great on the outside maybe, but on the inside, you might be causing inflammation. Any comments on that? Like, why is that seems to be like very trendy nowadays. Why do you think that is? Or why do you think it's so popular?
Well, it allows us to continue to eat. Here's how we're wired. Our human nature, we're wired to want to make a change without having to make any change. And so keto allows us to eat all the things that are sort of our guilty pleasures, butter, bacon, those things that are the guilty pleasures that are the worst possible things for us. What we know about dieting in particular, or adopting any kind of food plan, is that when you say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go keto, I'm going to go paleo, I'm going to go vegetarian or vegan, anytime you do any of that, you automatically start to eat more mindfully, and you start to cut out calories, and you start to cut portion size down. So there's this sort of subconscious response to knowing that we're going to do something for a certain goal.
Yeah.
So when that happens, we do tend to lose weight because we're eating more mindfully. Just like if you food journal, if all you do is write down what you eat and make no other changes, you'll lose weight. There's research that supports that all you do is write it down. You start to lose weight because it becomes more mindful. And so that's part of the thing with keto. That's why people see that immediate impact. But then again, like we said before, what they don't see is the inflammation that's happening internally. And that does come. People start to not feel really well on the keto diet. They go through the keto flu. They, people who are on a keto diet have, one of the side effects is really bad breath. And who wants that, right? It's because there's stuff going on inside of you that shouldn't be going on inside of you. And what a lot of people don't realize is if you look into the history of keto, it was designed decades and decades ago for children who had epilepsy, who had seizure disorders, who were not responding to medication as a last resort. Not as a primary treatment, but as a treatment for children who were not responding to medication. Fast forward some years, and in the medical field, they discovered that they could get the same result for people with diabetes. And again, it's as a last resort. It's for people who were diabetic, who were not responding to any medication. And so somewhere along the line, it sort of became this spinoff of the Atkins paleo kind of diet as something a little bit more extreme. And it became a fad. And so it's sort of this hot topic. And it's interesting and super frustrating for me because there have not been any long-term studies done on how it affects the body. But we do know that it does cause inflammation. And that people do tend to see difficulty with their kidneys, difficulty with their stomach, difficulty with their heart from that diet. And it goes against, the ultimate goal.
Okay. No, understood. I don't know if you have an opinion on this. It's okay if you don't. One thing that I discovered through keto was bone broth. Do you have any thoughts on bone
Mhm.
broth?
Sure. I mean, it's a clear liquid, right? And so we drink a clear liquid, and it's bone broth is, there's other things that are added to it to make it flavorful, typically some sort of garlic or garlic and onion, which, garlic and onion are anti-inflammatory,
Mhm.
which is good. They're also high in glutathione, which our heart needs to function. So we're kind of supplementing with that.
Mhm.
But again, you still have that saturated fat that's coming
Mhm.
from the animal product, and it's just not the best source at all um, of nutrition. So if you
Okay.
make a really strong veggie broth that is really nutrient dense, you're going to benefit a whole lot more from that than you will even from bone broth without doing any of the damage.
So there's veggie broth. I didn't even know that existed.
Yeah, there sure is. Uh-huh.
Okay. That's cool. I'm learning every day.
Good,
Some
good.
some other things I want to talk about that I've always been kind of interested in. My whole life, I've never really eaten saccharin or aspartame because I always heard it was bad.
Mm,
Do you have any comments on saccharin, aspartame, or those type of fake sugars, like the processed? I guess I consider them lab-made sugars, but I don't know if that's true or not.
That's exactly what they are.
Yeah.
Absolutely. They're lab made sugars. And they can be really dangerous. There have been some that, were popular in the 70s that have been taken off of the market because they were really causing significant injury, illness, or death.
Mhm.
And there are huge, what we call carcinogens, which are cancer causing properties. That are in things like saccharin and aspartame, and the other thing is they are designed to specifically um, rewire your brain to make you think that you are eating something that is sweet that is not sweet. And so what tends to happen is, again, it kind of goes to that addictive part of your brain, um, and it makes you want more of it. So when you're drinking a diet coke, for example,
Mhm.
you tend to drink more of it because your body thinks that it's still craving the sugar. You're better off drinking a regular coke than you are drinking a diet coke.
Yeah.
um, and you also, like I said, you add that cancer causing part, which none of us need at all.
Definitely. Yeah. Don't need that.
Hmm.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I have a question here in the chat. I want to ask, what
Great.
is your favorite diet to recommend to clients? Or
Hmm.
like, what type of diet do you recommend to your clients?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I recommend a specific diet,
Mhm.
although I do guide my clients to a more plant forward diet, a more
Okay.
plant forward way of eating. The thing about diets is we think about a diet, we think, okay, I'm on a diet, or I'm going to go on a diet, or, that sort of thing. It's a temporary thing.
Mhm.
It's something that we want to do so that we can achieve a goal, usually weight loss, in a certain amount of time. And what happens when we diet is it's called yo-yo dieting. We diet, we come off the diet because, whew, done with that, right? I'm going to go back to doing what I was doing before. And the body fights to maintain a homeostasis. So, in this sort of equilibrium. And so it will fight to gain that weight back. Most diets don't do any detoxing. And by detox, I don't mean go drink a detox tea. I mean, put the right nutrients in your body that it will detox itself. Um, so when you diet, you lose fat cells, but you hold on to the toxins, because toxins attach to fat cells. So if all you're doing is burning the fat cells and not addressing the toxins that are in your system, then the toxins are going to try to find something to attach to. So once fat cells start to come back into play, it will attach to those. The toxins in your body will attach to those. And then you increase and increase and increase those fat cells. And then you end up gaining more weight than you lost. Um, so that's part of it. And then when I say yo-yo dieting, so then we go on another diet, right? And then go through the same cycle. And each time we tend to gain a little bit more each time, and it becomes harder and harder because the body kind of fights this system. And so what I recommend to people is you make a lifestyle change. You start to really look at how you eat and why. Are you an emotional eater? Because if you are, well, you got to figure that out. Maybe you need some counseling. Maybe you need some exercise. Maybe you need something else to another outlet when you're feeling emotional. Are you somebody who doesn't like to exercise in general? You don't like to move your body. And so that's important too, to move your body. So you start to make these lifestyle changes. And you work on stress management, work on getting enough sleep, work on drinking enough water. All of those things become a part of the lifestyle change. So it's not so much about recommending a specific diet as it is saying, let's learn how to eat and why it's important to eat these things. Yeah. And then you take that with you, and it's not just a means to an end. It becomes a lifestyle, and it's more sustainable.
Yeah. Awesome. I like that. Yeah. It's a lifestyle, and diet does imply like, let's just try this really intense thing for like 10 days or not 10, like a few weeks and then quit.
Right. Right.
And I've seen that before. It's like, you can, there was a weird fad a long time ago where it's like, just eat banana. Do you remember that?
No, but I've heard of the cabbage soup diet, which is sort of the same thing, right? Okay. All you do is eat cabbage soup.
Yeah, it's just like, you can only eat bananas. You can eat as many as you want, but the only bananas. I don't know what's going on.
It's funny.
So what are some ingredients to never eat? I've heard some things about like MSG. I've heard that for a while. What are some ingredients people should look out for and be like, I'm not going to eat this? Not good.
The easiest way to answer that question is, if you can't pronounce it, in most cases, you shouldn't be eating it. Okay. If it's made in a lab, it's not made for your body. Those kinds of things are good, just kind of general rules to consider. Yeah. So MSG, for anyone who doesn't know what MSG is, it's monosodium glutamate. It's in a lot of Chinese food. They kind of get a bad rap for having it because it's in a lot of Chinese food, but it's not. I guess it's not a bad rap because it shouldn't be there. But it's also in Doritos. It's in a lot of things that are processed foods, or pretty much only processed foods. So it's a flavor enhancer is what it is. It makes things taste a little bit better, and it's a neurotoxin. So it's an actual neurotoxin. So it's actually toxic to the brain because it's like the aspartame and the saccharin, where it tells the brain one thing, and then we want to eat more of it. We crave more of it. A lot of people get headaches after they eat Chinese food. They'll get headaches after they eat something with MSG and not realize it. So those kinds of things are sort of what you should look to. So when, the best way to eat, the most ideal way to eat is to eat where there's no label on it at all. An apple doesn't have a label on it. Spinach doesn't have a label on it. But if it does, then you look and you read the ingredients list. So a lot of people look at that little chart and they see, okay, well, how much protein does it have? How many carbs? How many grams of sugar? Well, that doesn't really tell us a whole lot, because sugar in an apple is much different than sugar in an Oreo, right? So then you look at the little paragraph underneath of ingredients, and so those are listed from most commonly occurring, or most occurring to least occurring, in how whatever you're eating is made. So if sugar is the first ingredient, then that's a red flag already, unless you're buying sugar. But when you start to read that list, it should all be food. You should know what everything in that little paragraph is, with the exception of sometimes you'll see some probiotics, like you might see a word like lactobacillus, which is a probiotic, which is really, it's a naturally occurring healthy bacteria in your gut. So something like that's okay. But when you see this list of things that you don't know what they are, and these little parentheses that says to prevent caking, to flavor enhancer or natural flavors. You don't know what those things are. And so generally, you shouldn't be putting them in your body.
Yeah. I never thought about it, but it's almost like they're giving you an excuse for like, we're putting this in here to prevent caking, so it's okay. Like they're almost
Right.
for putting a chemical in there.
It's a good point. Yep.
Never thought about that. What about caffeine? Okay, so as I'm doing this interview with you, I'm drinking a breakfast blend, not the strongest tasting, but the highest caffeinated version of coffee. 7:30 at night.
Right. 7:30 at night.
What can you say about caffeine and how that affects us?
So there's some really interesting studies on the health. I'm going to talk about the health benefit of caffeine first, and what it does for the brain. There's some really interesting studies that show that caffeine, particularly caffeine in green tea, coffee, that sort of thing, that helps prevent Alzheimer's. However, that is only when it's 8 ounces or less consumed in a day, with nothing added to it. So often the problem with coffee or caffeinated drinks is what's done to it. So Coke, right? You've got carbonated water, which is fine, but then you've got corn syrup and you've got all these colors and artificial flavors and things added to it. So that makes it bad. Coffee, we go to Starbucks and we order a caramel frappuccino or a caramel macchiato or these things where they're dumping all these syrups and simple syrups and flavors and whipped cream, right? And into the coffee. And then it becomes, what we've done to the coffee that makes it bad. The very thing was, when we turn it into a dessert that we're then having for breakfast every morning. So aside from all of that, if you're just drinking pure black coffee, for example, or pure green tea, you want to be aware of it can raise your heart rate. It can, in excess. So we're talking about over 8 ounces a day. It can raise your heart rate. It can raise your blood pressure. It can make you anxious. It can actually increase anxiety. It can make you have, a frequent urge to urinate. It can, and then it becomes a dehydrating source. I see you grabbed your water bottle. Very good. Speaking of dehydrating. There's quite a bit of research out there too that shows us why we really shouldn't have it in excess. So it's a delicate balance. So if you're thinking, 4 to 6 ounces a day of pure, coffee with something minimally done to it, or green tea, a cup of green tea with a little bit of honey. Green tea has other anti-carcinogenic. We talked about carcinogens. It's anti-carcinogenic properties to it. So there's a balance there. But definitely, most people don't sleep well in general, but when they drink coffee at 7:30 at night, then chances are it will disrupt their sleep. And we can build a tolerance to it to where we're not even aware. We just think, oh, I only need to sleep 5 or 6 hours. I'm fine. But that's not really the case. It's that we've just become used to it because of the stuff we're putting in our body.
Yeah. And I'm actually looking forward to, I'm joining one of your programs. It's called Shred 10. Do you want to say anything about that? I might if there's a link or anything, just send it to me and I'll put it in the description.
You got it. I will.
But I'm excited. That's the detox. Go ahead.
Yeah. So Shred 10 is really cool. It's a detox program. It's a healthy living kickstart program. I'm cautious about calling it a detox because we're not doing any detox teas. We're not doing anything like that. It's about truly detoxifying the body. So the Shred 10 program is 10 days. It's not 10 pounds. It's 10 days of shredding bad habits is the idea behind it. And replacing it with good. So what you'll be doing is, we mentioned something about plant powders early on. So you'll be consuming those. So they're little capsules that are filled with dehydrated fruits and veggies, and then also drinking a plant-based, low glycemic, gluten-free protein powder. So in that combination, you will be getting over 55 plant phytonutrients in your body every day, which is huge because it all works in synergy together. And then you'll also be eating a primarily plant-based diet. You'll eliminate gluten and dairy completely, eliminate or minimize caffeine, eliminate alcohol for those 10 days, and minimize sugar and processed foods. You make a commitment to getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep every night in that 10-day period, and you make a commitment to exercising most of those days. So it sounds like a lot, but there's also a community piece to that, and then individualized coaching with me. So I really do guide you through it, and in a way that's both nurturing and holding you accountable to those things. So you learn a lot, and you really do. Many people kind of go through the program in the first few days. They feel the detox. They feel sluggish. They feel kind of tired and maybe bloated or a little bit, kind of just generally uncomfortable. You push through those first couple of days, and then you feel more energy. And then you feel, oh, wow, I slept really well last night. And you start to see the benefits of those things pretty darn quick. Which is really cool. And the idea behind it is to be a kickstart to healthier living. So, we talk about dieting and that sort of thing. It's 10 days, a 10-day kickstart to healthier living, so that hopefully you're sustaining a lot of those things after the 10-day period.
Yeah.
So I'm excited you're going to do that.
I'm excited too. And I like to go hardcore. So even though I drink a ton of coffee, I'm going to go 100% no coffee.
Wow.
I like to do it anyway.
Good.
So we'll see how that
Good.
goes.
I'm glad to know ahead of time.
What, Wendy?
Stop calling me.
I had another question here. Oh yeah, something I discovered that I love that I stopped doing kind of during the pandemic, or like the last year, 2020, like the heat of the pandemic, because I heard it can hurt your immune system sometimes. Was fasting. I loved intermittent fasting, and I'm actually doing that as a habit. But they were saying it's not bad for your immune system, but it weakens your immune system a little bit not to eat or to fast for a long time.
Yeah, I think it. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But I just wanted to hear what you think about fasting, different forms of fasting. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of really promising research about intermittent fasting, that people can lose weight and maintain it. People who are diabetic tend to see drops in their A1C. That it can naturally boost testosterone levels, which are important for men and women as we age. And it can naturally decrease or help protect us against cancer. So there's a lot of benefit to intermittent fasting. There are also a lot of different ways of doing it. You can do so. Just again, for anyone who's not familiar with what intermittent fasting is, it's generally where you eat all of your calories in a condensed time, and then you give your body longer breaks for it to process all of that food. So you pretty much eat the same number of calories, generally speaking, in, let's say, 6 to 8 hours. So maybe from 10 a.m. you eat breakfast, and then you stop eating by 4, and then you don't eat anything again until 10 a.m. the next morning. So different ways of doing that. Some people have shown that they gain weight on intermittent fasting. So it kind of depends on your body type a little bit and how your body responds to it. The other piece is, what you can't do is cram a big old juicy cheeseburger and French fries and a caramel macchiato and a breakfast muffin and a meat lover's pizza into that 6 to 8 hours. You will not benefit. So some people really do think that that's how you can do that. Yeah. And it doesn't work. So you also, if you're going to do it, you're going to do it effectively. And if it's the right thing for your body, then you want to still really think about the kinds of foods you're eating, the nutrients that you're eating, and make sure that that's what you're putting in your body during that time.
So good foods. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have a question in the chat here about carbs. Any comments on carbs? Are they good, bad? Are there different types of carbs?
I have lots of comments on carbs.
Yeah. Oh, really?
Yeah. So we're a
Okay.
backward society, right? Because we hear all the time, high protein, low carb. Eat high protein, low carb. We go to the doctor, eat high protein, low carb. And it's the exact opposite of what we need to be doing. We are not a protein deficient country. We eat way too much protein in general. I hear people tell me, well, the nutritionist at my doctor's office is telling me I need to eat 160 grams of protein a day, and I need to cut my carbs. And that just makes me want to pull my hair out. Because again, the protein sources are so important, and can be so highly inflammatory. Carbs are they're not all the same, right? You can eat white bread, white rice, white crackers, whatever kind of sugar is a carb, is simple. So simple carbs, and those simple carbs are the things that we want to avoid. Complex carbs are really critical, though, to our heart health. They're really critical to establishing a healthy gut microbiome. We hear about that. That's all the positive bacteria and probiotics, prebiotics, and how our gut works and processes food. Without carbs, we have no microbiome. We have to have those complex carbs in order to establish that. So it's a tricky thing, right? Because we really do need carbs, and we desperately need fiber. So we're not a protein deficient country. We are a fiber deficient country, which is why we see so many diseases that affect the digestive system, because it's devoid of fiber. If we don't have fiber in our digestive system, things are just not going to move the way they're meant to move. And it cleans our system. So you flip-flop that, and what happens is the inflammation in the body starts to go down. You have energy, right? We have to have carbs for energy. And carbs come from, the healthy carbs come from plants.
Yeah.
So yeah, carbs are a hot button for me.
Oh, yeah. Well,
and yes, white potatoes are good.
Yeah. Potatoes are good? Wow.
White potatoes are good. Yeah. With the skin on. You bet it. You better believe it.
When you eat fiber, you're pretty much feeding your gut microbiome and making it healthy.
Right.
In addition to feeding yourself.
You're right. So, right. Yep.
Okay. Very cool. And let me see if there's anything else. Anything else you want to say about nutrition before we switch over to meditation?
I don't think so. I mean, I think we've covered a lot. Yeah, I think just what I will say is the best approach is a rainbow diet. So if you're eating all the colors of the rainbow on your plate, you're going to have a really strong nutritional variability in your system, and that will benefit you tremendously. And it also doesn't leave a whole lot of room for the other stuff, right? If you're eating a huge plate of colorful food, of fruit and veggies and berries and brown rice and that sort of thing, there's just not going to be a whole lot of room for the chicken and the fish and the beef and all of that. You're going to get plenty of calories from that, and you do get plenty of protein from plants. By the way.
Oh yes, that makes very cool. Okay, so rainbow, get those colors into the food that you're eating.
Right.
Not just not just the black and white Oreos like I'm doing.
Right. Get the green ones, at St. Patrick's Day.
St. Patrick's
Not
Day.
really, just kidding.
The green food coloring. For coloring purposes only, of course.
You're right.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. A lot of wisdom here. I wish we could talk about all the aspects, but there's just so much to nutrition. There's just so many different facets of it. And I want to make sure we get to meditation. I'm not an expert. I've been meditating maybe 3 years. It's helped me a lot. on and off. I've done different types. Like, I don't know if you know about metta meditation, you know what that is? That's one of my favorites. And then Transcendental, I've tried that. And I do that when I'm really tired and I want to keep working. And then, just like the normal, like pay attention to your breath type of meditation. How did you get into meditation? What's that journey been like? And what have you learned along the way?
Well, for me, meditation started about stress, or started with just trying to find a healthy way for, sorry. What am I trying to say here? A healthy way to manage stress. It came for me starting with breath work. That's sort of how my journey with it started. But as you start to learn a little bit about meditation, there's so much more to it. So, like you said, transcendental meditation is one of the more studied, as far as scientifically studied meditations, where they've actually found links to lowering blood pressure, to lowering anxiety and depression, to really the actual bio feedback that we get from changing something. So transcendental meditation has done that, which is really amazing. But there's also Buddhism, meditation from the Buddhist perspective, and there's just quiet meditation, and there's meditative activities that we can do as well. So like going for a walk outside, going in some quiet space, going for a hike can be meditative. Sitting by the ocean can be meditative, where we're listening to the ocean. So it really is about, ultimately, it's giving your system a moment to be quiet and to really focus on just either the sound of your breath or a particular sound. Like transcendental meditation is more about a sound. It's about just releasing everything else and concentrating on being still. Because we just don't do that. We go, and our body never has a chance to catch up. And so for me, starting the day meditating, I try to meditate in the mornings for 20 minutes. I will set an intention for my day, or for the next 6 months, or for some period of time. And just I read about it, I write about it, and then I just let it go, and then meditate quietly, and try to quiet my mind during that next 20 minutes. And what happens is that you come out of that and you feel like you've had a nap. I mean, you feel refreshed. You feel like this really calm, renewed energy that then you can go out and start your day. We live such stressful lives that we really need to take that time to just sit and be still. And it's different. As some people will say, well, what about prayer? If prayer is what resonates with you, that's very powerful too, right? But it's also different. You can actively have time for prayer. And that is it tends to be something more devotional and active. Whereas meditation is, again, it can be a very spiritual thing that we do, but it's quiet and it's stillness and it's quieting the mind, rather than being an active voice of intention during that space.
That makes sense. And have you had any epiphanies, or just like any like breakthrough moments through meditating, or anything that you just remember that was very memorable from your meditation journey?
That's a great question. I have to think about that for a second. I think one of the things that strikes me isn't a moment, but it's when I know that I've been able to really sit and quiet my mind. I'll feel like I'm floating. Like I have this kind of physical sense of it feels like I'm floating. I don't achieve that every time I meditate. That doesn't happen every time, because sometimes there's just so much going on. Like my to-do list is huge, or, there's these other things that are happening that are distracting me. And so it's more an activity of just really working to quiet my mind.
Mhm.
But other times when I can get to that space, it can feel sort of like this floating sensation of weightlessness, which is really powerful, because then you come out of it and you take a deep breath, and all of a sudden you feel this kind of rejuvenated feeling.
Yeah.
Um, and I know what's happened for me is somewhere along the line, there's been this sort of correlation between meditation and gratitude.
Hmm.
And I can't really, I wouldn't be able to pinpoint exactly where that happened, but the two really happen together for me. And I know in some of the darkest times in my life, that's been really powerful to have that outlet, because in the dark times in our life and the lives and the times where we can go through struggle, it can be really tough to think about what we're grateful for.
Mhm.
And when we have that intention of gratitude in our heart, and then we go into that meditative space, it just can really be a calming sense of everything really is going to be okay,
Yeah.
because everything really is going to be okay. We are survivors, we are just wired that way.
Yeah.
And meditation kind of just helps remind us of that.
It allows you to find that. That's awesome. I like that.
Mm.
Do you have a favorite type of meditation? Is there?
Um, I think that, yes and no. So I've done the kind of meditation where you do chanting,
Mhm.
and I've gone through a teaching of some classes of Transcendental meditation, which was really cool to go through. Um, but I think for me, just really sitting in quiet space and focusing on, without getting too far out there. We talk about the third eye, or you might hear about the third eye. So it's kind of just a space of looking, kind of center, right? Looking at nothing is the idea behind it, is to focus on nothing. And so when you kind of go into that space, then it's very calming for me. There was a time where I needed the guided meditation in order to get the other voices out of my head.
Yeah.
And I'm beyond that now, which is kind of nice. But music can help, and so I don't know if that answers your question. It's not a
Yeah.
particular kind, but just, yeah. I mean, there's some really cool apps out there now too, like
Mhm.
Headspace and Calm, and those are cool because, especially for beginners, they um, they give a wide variety of how to do it, and you can set it for 5 minutes, 20 minutes, or anything in between.
Mhm.
You can have the voice of who, like Leonardo DiCaprio or somebody, or you can have music,
Yeah.
or chimes, or you can set these different things to play in the background. Or you can have quiet, right? And so it's nice to have options and to kind of be able to see what resonates. And I think that there's some change that happens over time too.
Yeah.
Um,
No, I hear you. I started the same way with guided meditation, and then sort of from there, you learn all the different tricks and all the different ways, and you're like, okay, this is the one I like. This is what I don't
mhm,
like.
mhm.
Even sometimes now, it's like I need the guided because I just feel like so unfocused. I need something. Um,
Right. And it's
yeah.
nice to be able to have that to go back to, right?
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Um, Very cool. And I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. 1 hour in. Do you mind going just a little bit longer? Which we can wrap it up if you like. It's up to you.
No, go ahead. If you have another question, I'm all yours.
Okay. Just wanted to ask about real quickly, like some of the benefits of meditation that you
Mm,
have, like, because I know people get into it, like, so like people get into nutrition for weight loss, right? But I'm
mm,
sure that the benefits go very deep when it comes to meditation. What are some of those benefits that you like to speak on?
mhm. So for me, it was, like I said, stress management. You know,
Mhm.
just I have live a busy life. There's a lot of moving parts, so to speak, in my world, and so that can be really stressful. And stress really has a negative impact on the body physically.
Mhm.
Um, and so, so for me and for many of us, I have a family history of stroke and high blood pressure.
Mhm.
My mom had a massive stroke, and that's rooted in stress, really. Blood pressure and that sort of thing is rooted in diet, exercise, and stress. Stress is a huge component of that. Um, but for some people, it's about anxiety. Sometimes it's about depression. Sometimes it's about, different things that are happening. Some people meditate specifically because they have cancer. They're going through cancer treatment. And there are some studies that show that meditation helps us to fight cancer. It actually helps to kill cancer cells. So there are a tremendous amount of physical benefits to meditation. And it's just such a powerful thing that we don't always realize. I mean, the mind is quite powerful. And when we utilize it as a tool in our health journey and as a big piece of a big component to our health, just like nutrition, just like exercise, sleep, water, meditation, then it really helps to kind of bring all those parts together.
Yeah. Do you think we should be teaching kids to meditate, like young kids?
I do. So, okay. Are you familiar with Bob Roth?
Is that I'm thinking of Bob Ross. I'm thinking about the painter. Is that what you said?
Right. No, this is Bob Roth. He is, okay. He's a leader in the Transcendental meditation world. And so he's the guy that taught Ellen DeGeneres how to meditate, and Tom Hanks, and some of these really big people. And it's he teaches within the David Lynch Foundation. And he's I guess you would say he's the head of the David Lynch Foundation. Anyway, I got to meet him and spend some time with him on the skirts of my boyfriend who was interviewing him for a program. And so it was really awesome to meet him. But one of the things that struck me, Jerry Seinfeld is part of that also. So he's a spokesperson for Transcendental meditation. But one of the things that struck me is that they're doing, it was at a fundraiser in New York. So, and the fundraiser is for schools, because they found that teaching kids to meditate at very young ages, I mean, from kindergarten up through high school, has helped improve academics. It's helped them miss less days of school. Kids who are at risk are graduating with flying colors. Behavior issues have decreased significantly in the schools that are utilizing that program. Yeah. So yes, I think it's a really amazing thing. And it's a healthy coping mechanism. So I think there's so much pressure on young children to perform, and from kindergarten up, that where they're expected to meet these certain criteria so young, and then by the time they're 16, 17, they're supposed to know what they're going to do for the rest of their life. It's just so much pressure. And then you add, tons and tons of extracurriculars and all of that they're not taught any healthy coping mechanism for stress. And then they don't try to, we don't usually try to figure that out until, again, like nutrition, until something starts to break down. Until there's some catalyst that makes us take a step back and say, I've got to do things differently. But what could that look like if we taught these young children healthy coping mechanisms when they're 5, and they get to carry that through their life? So yeah, I think it would be really powerful to teach children to meditate. Yeah,
I think they should add it to schools. I think that would be awesome if they did.
I did too. They're working on it. Yep.
We'll see that in the future at some point. Finally, I just want to ask you what advice you have for someone who's thinking about starting meditating, if they want to make it a habit. Like, how can you make that a habit?
So, one of the most common things I hear from people is that, I can't meditate. I can't sit there. I can't make my mind stop. My mind starts to swirl. I get agitated. I would say sit with that. Give yourself 5 minutes to sit with that, because that's the beginning. And that's the one thing that can discourage us, because we think we're not doing it right. And it's actually an important first step to meditating. One of my favorite gurus is Pema Chodron. She's really, she's a monk, and a Buddhist monk, and she is just really charming and down to earth, and she talks about that. She talks about that quiet, or finding that space in the very beginning of meditation. And if you just sit with that kind of swirling thought process and breathe and just stay with it for 5 minutes, the next day you'll probably be able to do 10. Because you just stick with it. And if not, then you keep doing 5. And then ultimately you can expand that window, and you really start to come down and see how that can happen. And if that's too hard, then like what we were talking about, you can use a guided meditation. You can use music, or a sound to focus on, like chimes, wind chimes, for example. Maybe that's something that you can just listen to actively during that 5 minutes. And that starts that ball rolling. But it's a practice, and it's called a practice for a reason, right? It's not something we just pick up and make a touchdown.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's funny. I like the way you put that. Yeah, thank you. This has been very enlightening conversation on nutrition and meditation. Before I ask you my final question, I want to say, how can people get in contact with you? How can people find you? So if they wanted to work with you with the nutrition stuff and becoming more holistically well in their life.
Yeah, well, thanks. Yeah, so I have a Facebook page and an Instagram page or account. It's Food Goddess Wendy Stengel. And so those are great ways, and you can direct message me, private message me through there. My phone number and email are both listed on those as well, and I will make sure you have those so we can put them in the chat here.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, put those either in the chat, or we'll put them in the description afterwards, either way.
Okay, and then I'll also share, you mentioned the health hacks. I'll share the link to that to anybody that wants to just join that. That's a free health hack. And then there are some, that we have a series of 3 different things with these other 3 health coaches. And at the end of that, so you can kind of take a look there if that's something that resonates with your
definitely.
audience.
I think I actually have let me put that in the chat real quick.
Okay.
Let's see. I don't have that, but I do have your Facebook page. I'll put that in the chat since I have it.
Okay, I'll get the rest to you.
Okay. Very good. And then, yeah, thank you very much. I learned a lot. And I always like to ask this question. It doesn't have to be related to nutrition or meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And the question is, if you could leave the audience with just like one final important message that you wanted everyone watching to know, now and in the future, what would that message be?
That message would be to understand that we're all a work in progress, that there is nobody that lives a perfectly healthy life. We all start from different places, and we all have a journey to go through. And there are things along that journey where life throws us curveballs, and we do the best that we can with the skills that we have in the moment. And if we can go into our health journey from that perspective and have it be judgment free, where we're not harshly judging ourselves, and we quiet that voice that can be quite mean in our heads at times, then we know that we can be successful. And yeah, just keep going. That there's no failure. There are some stumbling blocks at times, but there's no failure. We just keep going. We keep picking up and moving forward.
I like that. It's a very important message. I like that.
Mm-hmm.
We forget that. I think that we're works in progress, and you can always get back up. And we're, like you said before, we're meant to survive. Like, we're designed to survive. So it'll be okay.
Mm-hmm.
Great message.
Joseph, this was so fun. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. It's thank you for enlightening my audience so that they can see sort of some of the things going on in the nutrition world and meditation, things like that. So thank you so much. So great to have you. If you enjoyed, be sure to like and subscribe for more amazing interviews and just different things. I talk about basically how you can improve your life through all different areas: finances, your health, public speaking. I like public speaking, communication skills. So be sure to like and subscribe for that. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
wave goodbye, and